Okay, alrighty. Welcome everybody. My name is Can Parthaban. I'm here with Lyngso. And we have a great talk by Lisa and Kathleen Putnam on cover crops today. So we're going to get right into it. This class is being recorded. So towards the end of the class, I'll send out the PDF copy of the presentation, as well as a link to the presentation as well. And I will ask kindly to mute your microphones here. I see some folks have their microphones unmuted. Thank you kindly, and we'll get started. And also one more thing before we start is questions. Go ahead and enter your questions regarding the presentation in the chat, and Lisa and Kathleen will address them towards the end of their talk. And the questions that we don't get to now, we'll probably address them via email when I send out the recorded link as well as the presentation. So hopefully we can get to most of the questions, but if not, we'll get to them via email. And let's welcome Lisa and Kathleen Putnam.
Hi. Hi. I'm Lisa, and my sister Kathleen's going to be doing most of the presentation today, and I'll chime in from time to time.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This class is just about cover crops. It's not about soil, or I mean, it's just cover crops. I watched the beginning of a cover crop class the other day, and he got into soil structure and all of that, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to do cover crops. So here we go. Oh. So what is a cover? This is what we're going to cover. What is a cover crop? Why cover crop? How to cover crop, and different plants. Shoot. Okay. The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. This is a picture from the Dust Bowl, and that was said by FDR.
Yeah. And I don't know, we asked if people could watch the movie Kiss the Ground, which we'll come to a little later, but they show FDR going throughout the United States, mostly the Midwest, and talking about everything that happened when we don't take care of our soil. Okay.
Lisa, you want to talk about the soil food web?
Sure. So, what is cover crop? Cover crop is a temporary unharvested crop grown to enrich and protect the soil. And what we're trying to do, well, there's several things you're trying to do that Kathleen will get into with cover crop, but you have to have this first trophic level of photosynthesis. And that is then going to store carbon in the roots, which is going to feed all the life in the soil. So you guys have probably heard a million times by now, but in one handful of soil, there's more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. So that is why we want to cover crop. Okay, Kathleen.
Okay. And what I notice most about the soil food web is it all starts with the plants. So what is a cover crop? It's also a crop that's planted for the purpose of improving soil quality and nutrition, and or attracting beneficial insects and sequestering carbon in the soil. I just watched a TV show on Nova, and they are spending actually trillions of dollars on research for these big machines on how to get carbon dioxide out of the air. And this one NASA scientist said they could spend up to 7 trillion a year to do it.
Wow.
Or if you watch the movie Kiss the Ground, we already have the technology. It's plants. Plants are amazing. They take the energy from the sun, the solar energy, and convert it into chemical energy, carbon. So we have the technology. It's been here all along.
Yeah. And there's only one thing that puts carbon back into the soil, and that's plants. When I say plants, like trees, shrubs, plants. it doesn't do it by raining. It doesn't do it by other forces of nature. There's only one thing that will put carbon back into the soil where it belongs, and that's plants.
Roots in the ground.
Roots in the ground. So you can spend all this money to try to take carbon out of the atmosphere, or you can plant a plant. So,
Yeah. So here's the biological carbon sequestration. And I mean, it's pretty simple, right? The plant takes the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere when it photosynthetes, and it puts it into the soil as root exudates. Why cover crop? This is the #1 reason why I cover crop. If we can increase the carbon content of our soil 2% worldwide, we can reduce the carbon in our atmosphere, and the carbon dioxide will be drawn down, sequestered into our soil. It's that simple. So these are reasons why to cover crop: to sequester carbon. Lisa, you want to get into the nitty-gritty?
sure. And to build the soil's organic matter and the humus content, and to improve the soil structure. So you can see the slot. I always get hummus and humus mixed up. But you're trying to form aggregates in your soil, and that's what's holding all the good stuff, holding the oxygen, holding the water, making the capacities for the roots to go down into the soil. And as Kathleen mentioned earlier, all those things to happen, you need living soil. Soil is alive, dirt is dead. So dirt doesn't have life in the soil. And how do you bring life into the soil? By having roots in the ground. When you've got roots in the ground, Kathleen used the word exudates, which I think she defines later. They're sloughing off carbohydrate chains, and all those carbohydrate chains are feeding all the microbial life in the soil. And then that's there's a little glue that they give, and then that's what's forming the nice aggregates in your soil. Okay, Kathleen.
Yeah, and the roots, if you get deep-rooted plants, they actually bring nutrients up and put them in the topsoil, making them available to your plants. And daikon radishes, which is one of my favorite parts of a cover crop, actually they hold the nitrogen in their big daikon root. And as they decompose, they release the nitrogen. So they stop the leaching of nitrogen, and they release it to your plants when your plants need it.
And the importance of that is the leaching of the nitrogen. It actually all ends up into our rivers and our streams, and then it eventually ends up in the Gulf of Mexico, where you get a lot of problems when you have too much nitrogen. You get nitrogen bloom and a big imbalance with algae, and so you want to keep the nitrogen in your soil. Okay, go ahead, Kathleen.
Cover cropping also increases the microbial activity and biomass in the topsoil, and provides food for the soil microbes and earthworms, which are vital for plant health. And you can outcompete your weeds. But weeds are better than nothing. So if you have a choice of weeds or nothing, go for weeds, because weeds still do provide your soil with exudates. But I have a neighbor who has Bermuda grass as his backyard lawn. So today, after this class, I'm going to go plant some Sudan grass along my fence line. It's a bit of an experiment, but I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to try to outcompete his Bermuda grass. And you increase the water infiltration, and the soil, if it's if it's full of life and it's healthy, it'll actually clean all the pollutants out of the water that's running through the soil and recharge our water table. Which I found this slide a couple weeks ago showing the water table in California, and it's all polluted. This, you can see the area, it's all the agricultural lands in California, and our water tables are all polluted because they don't cover crop. They don't have healthy soil, they have dirt. And when the water runs through this, it goes into the water table full of pollutants, which is really scary when I found this slide. Cover cropping also provides habitat, prey, nectar, and pollen for beneficial insects. And it will break up the subsoil, clay layers, and plow soils, also called hard pan, for increased water and air penetration. And if you notice the diversity of the plants and all their different root structures, that's what you want. Oh, and I just found this yesterday. Lisa sent me a link that UC Santa Cruz is doing some classes, and this this gentleman is getting almost over $400,000 from the USDA to study whether or not cover crops can replace the horrible chemicals we're using to sterilize the soil that the strawberry growers use.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I just added this slide today because this is another use of cover crops, is to break the disease cycle that a lot of plants, because a lot of strawberries are planted in the same place over and over and over again. So they tarp the entire field and they fumigate it.
Oh, that's really bad.
And so they're trying to find other ways to get rid of those pathogens. Why cover crop? This I found fascinating. Because we have been fertilizing our crops since the mid-40s, the nutrient value of our vegetables and fruit has decreased.
Yeah.
So this was 27 different kinds of vegetables, but this would apply to fruit trees. This also applies to animals that eat the vegetables or the crop we're growing. You break the soil food web when you fertilize because the plant no longer produces exudates because they don't need to.
Yeah. And a point that Dr. Nichols makes, if you guys have watched Kiss the Earth or Kiss the Ground, is you can, you can actually be obese and undernourished at the same time because of such a drastic decline in the nutrition of our vegetables that we're eating.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
Lisa?
It comes as a surprise to many to learn that over 95% of life on land resides in the soil, and that most of the energy for this amazing world beneath our feet is derived from plant carbon. So, and yeah, well, we talked about a lot of the life in the soil. Also, our human bodies, we're mostly microbial. I think I'm going to get it wrong. It's probably similar. We're like 5% human and like 95% microbial. So we really need to take care of the microbes. To take care of the microbes, we need to cover the soil. The soil should be covered. All soil in the whole world should be covered all the time by something.
So root exudates. This is why I love plants. They give 30% of their energy to the soil if they're not fertilized. It's what they slough off. Like Lisa was saying earlier, that the roots slough off. Well, they do that on purpose. they do that to feed all of the microbes in the soil, and then those microbes bring them stuff. So it's a symbiotic relationship. But if we fertilize them, they don't have that relationship with the microbes in the soil. It's like if you never move your arm and your muscle atrophies. It's the same thing if we fertilize our plants. It's like they're not moving their muscles, and they don't give that 30% to the soil.
Exudates from living roots are the most energy rich of carbon sources. In exchange for liquid carbon, microbes in the vicinity of plant roots and microbes linked to plants via networks of beneficial fungi increase the availability of minerals and trace minerals required to maintain the health and vitality of their host. So just talking about the exudates again, and how they are forming carbon chains and how they are feeding the life in the soil, and how all plants are sequestering carbon.
So microbial activity also drives the process of aggregation, enhancing soil structure, stability, aeration, infiltration, and water holding capacity. All living things above and below ground benefit when the plant microbe bridge is functioning efficiently. So we're still on the wide cover crop. We could do like forever wide cover crop, but we're coming to the end of it. Healthy soil, the promise of our future. So this is regenerative agriculture. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. We used to say, what did they used to say? Substantial? No.
Oh, I know the word you're trying to think of.
Yeah, where you
subsistence.
No.
Farming.
Anyway, regenerative agriculture is where all the forward-thinking farmers are going now. That you don't just want to sustain your soil the way it is, you actually want to make it better. And in order to do that, you need to minimize soil disturbance, also called no-till. You need to energize with diversity. You need to keep the soil covered and maximize living roots.
And diversity is super important there. Oh, yay.
And then here's the movie we highly recommend. It's a great movie, and it's on Netflix.
Yeah. And it's really well worth watching. If you didn't get a chance to watch it before this class, make sure you get a chance to watch it. It's very good at explaining regenerative ag.
Yeah. So how to cover crop? Diversity is not dispensable. You need, the more you plant, the more diverse your plant mix, the better. Because each plant exudes its own unique blend. And the more plants you have, the greater the diversity of the microbes, and the whole system works better. It actually, your soil can become a super organism functioning amazing things. So what time of year should you cover crop? Always. You always want to have roots in the ground. So, and you guys are going to get this PDF, but they say fall planting, August to October. I just threw some seeds out Monday. So you can always cover crop, except in California, I should say. I mean, obviously, if you're in Canada right now, probably you're not gonna be able to get anything to germinate outside.
Yeah.
But always try to have roots in the ground.
Yeah. And Kathleen and I were talking right before class started. I have a small orchard. I'm in Portola Valley, California, which is inland from the coast. And I have I probably have 3 or 4 inches of wood chips in my orchard, other than right around my tree. I always cover crop right around my fruit orchard. But I just went to another cover cropping class, and they just throw seeds out even over their wood chips, and they try to get crimson clover, oats. They do a lot of, they do vetch, bell beans, oats. But anyway, the point is you can cover crop even if you've already mulched.
Yeah. And I also said, I just threw some seeds out yesterday of cosmos in my front yard. And it's mulched as well. And it's an experiment. I'll see if it works.
Yeah.
How to cover crop. A cover crop mixture or cocktail, they're referred to as cocktails mostly now, should have at least 8 different types of seeds, with 60% flowers or broadleaf, 40% grasses, and 1 legume at the most. And the legume, I've been watching a lot of cover crop webinars, and almost all of them use 3, 4, 5 legumes, because legumes have a relationship with a bacteria that they take nitrogen from the air and they put it in these little nodules that then break down and give nitrogen to the soil. But if your soil is functioning well, you have free living bacteria that are nitrogen fixers. They are not associated with legumes, but they're there, and they're fixing nitrogen from the air that is in your soil. So you don't have to cover crop with legumes to get nitrogen into your soil to feed your plants.
Yeah.
They find it.
And
And like if you look in a redwood forest, those redwood trees, there's no legumes growing around them, but they're getting plenty of nitrogen.
Yeah. And we learned that from Dr. Christine Jones, who I think we have some friends from Australia joining us today. She's an Australian soil scientist, and she, I think, puts no legumes at all in her cover crop mix.
Yeah. She doesn't. She doesn't think they're necessary. And she actually says if you put in too many legumes, and I found this to be true, just an experiment I did myself, they won't fix nitrogen if there's too many of them.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like if you go pull up your clover, if you have a field of just clover, you're not going to find very many nodules because it's not needed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need to add legumes.
Yeah. But maybe a bigger point here is if you have legumes on hand, if you have bell beans or fava,
Yeah, throw them out there.
Peas, alfalfa. Yeah, throw it out. The main point is you want to have something growing. So if you have them on hand, use them. If don't discard them. Mix them up. I just do a cocktail. I put a whole bunch. I know you're going to get into it later, Kathleen, but I put wildflower mix from Nature Seed in with my old peas that I didn't get around to planting. The seeds of that, some bell beans, some clover. It's just it's probably 50 different kinds of seeds by the time I'm done with making my cocktail.
Yeah, which that's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks to Nature Seed.
Okay, so how to cover crop? Throw the seeds out. Super easy. This is not a class for farmers. This is a class for backyard, just people. And I find just throwing out the seeds works really well. You can also intercrop, this is someone's raised bed, and I just got a can of seeds and I put them between, and I have another slide where I get more specific on this. But yeah, I just throw seeds out, which was great with COVID this year when all the nurseries were closed. I could still buy seeds, and I threw seeds everywhere in my backyard. and it looked great.
It's like Kathleen Appleseed.
Yeah. So I have 3 beds in my vegetable garden, and this is one of them that I cover cropped. So this is right before I'm going to cut it down. So first I moved out the irrigation lines because you don't want to mow them. And then I cut it down with my electric hedge trimmer. Then I mowed it. Then I seeded it and mulched it. And then I put my irrigation lines back. And then the birds were eating my seeds and the little germinated plants. So I put a floating row cover on it. And this is this year's cover crop bed. It's a little bit less messy right now. I took this picture this morning and I got lazy and I raised my mower height to 4 inches. So I knew I wouldn't cut my irrigation lines. And I just threw seeds into the debris. And you can see those hoops. I put bird netting over it until stuff germinated. And this is mostly oats and rye. There's some buckwheat and arugula and mustards and
Achillea?
yeah, probably. I don't know everything that's in there. I just threw a ton of seeds out.
Yeah, that looks great.
And there's my broccoli right next to it.
Yum.
In the other bed. I know I need to start eating it.
Oh gosh, you got some tomatoes on the ground there still.
I know. And this is just, you can cover crop everywhere in your yard. This is the side yard for our dogs. It's a pretty shady place. And the first picture just kind of shows, it's not an especially beautiful side yard. There's some natives and some huckleberry and snowberry. But the second slide on the right shows where I threw some seeds down.
Oh yeah.
And, I've been watering it like once a day just to keep them moist, and they're coming up. And this was a wildflower mix. So in the spring, this should be beautiful. And I also, under my Meyer lemon, I threw a bunch of seeds the other day, and luckily the rains came and they have all germinated.
Wow.
Yeah, and the birds have been eating a lot of it, but there's not that much I can do about it in this area. So
Yeah, plus they're going to poop out the seeds somewhere else, so you're cover cropping in other people's property that way.
yeah, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And then I have this one really shady area in my yard. So I got a shady seed mix of California natives, and I just threw out some seeds.
Nice.
And watered them once a day, and they're all germinating, and that's going to be lovely as well.
That'd be pretty.
So my point is, this is not just for your vegetable beds or for your fruit trees, or you can do this everywhere in your yard. You just throw out seeds. And here's the intercropping with kale, broccoli, and cauliflower.
And I just want to add to that. So polycropping is really, I know we're probably not farmers here, but when you grow corn on corn on corn or soy, I mean, really what you're trying to do is get a diversity of plants. So here, even though you're growing, it looks like some broccoli and cabbage and kale, when you're intercropping with a whole bunch of different species, polycropping, it's just so much better for your soil because it's going to be different exudates that those different plants are giving out.
Yeah, and your soil will be more alive. And I took a picture of my citrus this morning so you could see it. This is, I threw a bunch of cosmos and buckwheat and stuff around my little mandarin. And this was last summer. And then the one on the right is this morning. So I cut down all of that, threw a little bit of mulch on top, a very fine mulch, and some seeds. And you can see there's some California poppies coming up and maybe buckwheat. but stuff is starting to germinate. So what does the cover crop plant do? And this is more if you have an issue in your yard that you want to fix, what plant should you cover crop with? I would say, of course, a cocktail, but if you want to go more towards a certain thing, here's what each of these do. And so for soil erosion, you want a fast growing, good rooting plant like cereal rye or annual ryegrass. Any of the grasses, they germinate pretty fast and they have really fibrous roots. So any grass works. If you have compacted soil, I use daikon radish, which is the same thing as an oilseed radish. Sunflowers also work really well because they have a really deep taproot. Nitrogen fixation, you use legume. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way.
And do you go into photo remediation?
I don't, because I didn't research it well enough
Okay.
to, but there is evidence that plants in the mustard family, like daikon radishes, they actually will pull pollutants out of your soil. But then you want to remove that plant. Oh, and an important point, I don't know that, I kind of showed it when I showed my mowing down and stuff. When you terminate your plants, you want to leave the roots in the ground. That's the whole point, is you don't want to pull those plants out because the microbes' number one food source or favorite food source is living roots. Their second favorite food source is dead roots. And their third favorite food source is mulch.
Yeah.
So
And-
leave the roots in the ground.
Yeah. What I do is something called chop and drop. So when I'm taking out my cover crop, because I'm going to seed or have already seeded, usually I seed into an existing cover crop. And as my old cover crop dies back, then I just, I go with pruners and I just clip it off kind of in 1 to 2 inch chunks and just let it drop onto the ground, and it becomes mulch, and it becomes, those tops and all become part of the soil. And I take it all the way down to soil level, or maybe leave 1 or 2 inches of stubble. So the roots are in the ground, the tops have just become mulch. And then they cover up my next seed crop for my next cover crop. So trying to do 3 to 4 cover crop sowings a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 Should I read this, or is it that good?
I think that's good.
Okay. So grasses and brassicas are better than legumes at reducing nitrogen leaching. Cereal rye is very effective at reducing nitrogen leaching because it's cold tolerant and has rapid growth. And the most common brassicas to cover crop with are daikon radishes and mustards. I love daikon radishes. In our part of California, we have generally a fairly heavy clay soil. So the daikon radishes, you cut them off, and as they decompose, they really open up the soil beautifully.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to run through a few grasses and what they're good for. Annual ryegrass is something you could throw out right now. It's great for a winter crop, and it prevents erosion. It'll improve your soil structure and drainage, adds organic matter. Every cover crop adds organic matter, suppresses weeds and scavenged nutrients. Barley's a nice one. Prevent erosion, pretty much the same thing. It's a cool season. Brassicas can be warm season or cool season, depending on which one you use. They kill some soil-borne pests and scavenge nutrients. Buckwheat germinates really fast, grows really fast.
Yeah, that's
And
like
it's
30
it's beautiful. Your beneficial insects will like it. And it's loosens up your topsoil
Yeah.
and rejuvenates low fertility soil.
Yeah, you can see it kind of has a wimpy soil structure, so it's not, so it is adding organic matter, but not a ton, but it's such a quick cover crop. I mean, I think from seed to blooming is like 30 days. So
Yeah.
if you want to
Yeah.
get something in quickly and it is very pretty, buckwheat's a good one.
Yeah, and you can, in California, you can plant it anytime. Oats, I love oats. I just put some oats, well, in that slide I showed you. And oats, the only thing about oats is they will slow the germination of lettuce, cress, rice, wheats, and peas. So you want to wait 3 weeks because they have allelopathic properties. Rye is really good too. I like rye. It's a very fibrous root system, holds nitrogen, germinates really fast, grows really fast. This is I think this is my annual wildflower mix. Yeah, I get this from Nature Seed, and I'm not promoting Nature Seed, but this is just a really nice mix of a whole bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
And in my backyard, I garden in the ground, so I would add some grasses to this. But if you garden in a raised bed or you don't want grasses in your backyard, just throw this out.
Yeah, that's a pretty, what time of year are you using that one, Kathleen?
You know, I just threw this out last week.
Okay. Kathleen's in Santa Cruz, so she has a very temperate climate.
I did it in Woodside last week.
Oh, you did? Okay. So
I did this at a client's, and you know, maybe not everything's going to germinate, but there's enough in there that enough will germinate.
Yeah. And then things will surprise you too. They'll just hang out in the soil and then they'll come up in spring. And
Yeah.
It's kind of fun for when that happens.
Yeah, and then you have a seed bank.
Yeah.
And here's some examples of some cover crop cocktails. I don't remember where I got this. Oh, I love this chart. So this chart is from the USDA, and it shows cover crops, and the outer edges are grasses, and it shows you what's warm and what's cool. So the cool stuff is what you would be planting now or a little bit earlier, you know, fall, winter. The warm you would plant spring, summer. And then the next in are your broadleaf, and then in the middle is legumes.
Yeah. And one thing to note, like amaranth, warm season broadleaf, which is beautiful. I think amaranth is beautiful, but it will reseed itself and you'll have amaranth forever in
Yes.
that place. Same with quinoa and cucurbits. The other thing to mention, I mean, Kathleen mentioned this at the very start of the talk, but like a cucurbit, which is a cucumber or a melon or you're not eating that, you're feeding the soil. So I mean, you can grow it for a crop to eat, but then you're not growing a cover crop. So this would be something that you're either lightly, you're either chop and drop or lightly turning into the top of the soil. Any other, same with soy or any other edible crop, it's actually to feed the soil, not yourself.
Yeah. And sunflowers, you'll find if you plant sunflowers, they'll pop up all over the place later.
Which is fun.
Because of squirrels. So here are some benefits of plants, their seeding rate, depth, their honeybee value, beneficial insect value, and notes on them. And you guys, again, you'll be getting this PDF. So I just like these charts just to see what you want to do.
What does it
I'm
mean?
just flipping through, huh?
Alternative crop for host. What does that mean?
That's where the insect will also be. So if you want to get, like if you want some aphids, you
Uh-huh.
could plant white clover and you'll get aphids, which will bring in aphid predators.
I see. Okay. Okay.
So that's what the other host would be.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Uh-huh. And then this is from the Xerces Society. I had to look up how to say that, and I think I said it correctly. It's actually, Xerces is a butterfly that went extinct in California
Oh.
because its habitat died off.
Hmm.
So they have started trying to get people to plant plants that will help with butterflies.
Yeah.
So these are not necessarily cover crop, quote unquote, but they are plants that will help the beneficial insects and our native insects. And on the bloom period is what's on the far left. And it's nice to always have something blooming. That way you're always feeding the insects.
Yeah. And I might want to mention a lot of these aren't annuals. A lot of them are perennials like redbud and ceanothus and the whole point of cover cropping really is just keeping your soil covered. So if you have perennials, all the better. They're all sequestering carbon.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, there's a group that's trying to plant, I don't know, like 1 billion trees
Oh,
to help with climate change.
yeah.
So this is from Peaceful Valley, and this includes some of their mixes, which I was a little hesitant to put this in because it doesn't really explain what's in their mix, but you can go on their website and it is good information. So I put it in.
Yeah.
And you will get this. So have fun, throw out some seeds and make your yard beautiful. That's the end of our presentation.
And so
Here's some organizations in California, Northern California, that if you have questions, you can contact them. Here's some of my references. And thank you, Lyngso, Garden Materials. All right, do we have any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa and Kathleen. We've got a few questions here, so I'll start from the beginning. Let's see. So what cover crops would you suggest in the UK to use? UK or Las Vegas, so different climates.
Wow. Well, UK, can we ask them more questions?
If they're willing to unmute, yeah. Esmina, I believe, asked the question, not sure where in UK, but.
I know
I
oats.
I mean, it's generally fairly wet, so I would think any of the grass, if, as long as it doesn't freeze, you could do anything.
You could do anything that we've talked about today, but oats, of course, grow well. But so do a lot of the wildflower seeds. I mean, right now, of course, you're going into winter and it might.
Yeah, but you could do rye right now.
Yeah, you could do rye.
Rye and oats and
cool season grasses.
Yeah, cool season grasses. I'm not sure about the wildflowers in the
That
UK.
might be.
I know my mom and I actually did a garden tour of the UK, and there was a lot of dianthus, which you guys, I think, call Sweet William. But yeah, just, I don't know specifically. Las Vegas, gosh, it's hot probably there and not a lot of water. So you're gonna have to water, but I don't know, does it get cold in Vegas? I don't think so.
Is there more like of a desert? I think Nature Seed has a desert mix.
Yeah, they do. They have a Sonora desert mix, which has a very low water need.
Yeah, I would look
Right.
into Nature Seed for Las Vegas.
Yeah, I would too. And you will have to water it to get it to germinate, but after it germinates, you won't need to water it much.
Yeah.
And we've actually been thinking about plants wrong. We've been thinking about plants as taking from the soil, and like heavy feeder, light feeder, medium feeder, like they take all these things from the soil, when in fact most plants, well, not most plants, if you don't fertilize them, are giving 30% of their energy to the soil. So if you have a healthy soil, you don't have to worry about needing to water them once they get going, fertilizing them once they get going. They're actually giving to the soil more than they take.
Yeah. And one thing, since we're talking about water, plants use a lot less water than we
think.
I was actually talking to a garden designer yesterday, and I have most of my landscape is California natives, but I have from the last owner some camellias and azaleas, and I have never watered them. I've been here 3 years. I haven't watered them once, and they look great. They look terrific. And those are considered thirsty plants. But anyway, I just think in California, I think we overwater a lot.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so the next question is, if the plants or soils are fertilized organically, say with compost or alfalfa pellets, will they release energy? Will they release energy to the soil like underutilized plants?
Adding compost is good.
Yeah. Could you read that question one more time, Ken? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm not really understanding what this question is asking, but I'm assuming that they're asking if you fertilize the plants or soil organically using alfalfa pellets or compost, are they then going to supply
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I was the one who asked the question. Can I clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a autocorrect. You said if you don't fertilize your plants, but if as a master gardener, we're recommending I recommend fertilizing your plants by using compost or alfalfa pellets to add. Now, is that going to keep them from doing the exchange, or are you talking about if you're adding, straight, liquid nitrogen?
I'm talking about adding, not necessarily like Miracle-Gro, but adding. Compost is not a fertilizer. Compost is actually adding life to your soil, because compost has life in it.
So what about using cottonseed meal or alfalfa pellets, or something that slowly releases nitrogen as the plants take it up?
I don't know.
I mean, the reason I keep being told by even other master gardeners that we need to add nitrogen to our, under our citrus trees twice a year. And I haven't, but I think if I were to, I would want to do it by, using one of those methods.
Yeah, I have always cover crop my citrus, and I've never fertilized them. As far as alfalfa meal and the other meals, I honestly, I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Lisa, do you have anything?
Well, I mean, we used to use alfalfa pellets, or what I've done in the past is actually use alfalfa.
Yeah, I've mulched with alfalfa.
I've mulched with alfalfa, which is, I cut it up to little pieces, or not. I've left it in bigger chunks. I just get a bale of alfalfa and I mulch with that. And that's a very slow release of nitrogen into your soil. Yeah, I'd have to agree with Kathleen. I don't know. I don't know at what point you get to a tipping point where you stop the plant or you slow down the plant from putting out exudates, or if you're providing things for them, at what point are they going to say, oh, I don't have to do this anymore for myself? And
Okay.
then I'm also not sure if that's exactly the question.
Yeah, but I think if you mulched with like alfalfa, which you could also run through your lawnmower, well, it works great for breaking it up. I don't think that would affect your soil food web, and it would put some nitrogen in your soil. But if you cover crop, it wouldn't be necessary.
All right, thank you.
In raised beds, when I plant tomatoes, I do mulch with alfalfa. But raised beds are a little different than the soil than in the ground.
Yeah, and it's hard. Kathleen and I are both master gardeners as well, and I'm a master composter. Kathleen's a certified arborist, and you talk to 5 different master gardeners, you're going to get 5 different opinions, I think.
Yeah.
So you'll just have to experiment and see what's working for you.
True that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to some of the other questions here. Lots of questions about what kind of cover crops to use under fruit trees, as well as some flowers, or I'm assuming wildflowers that are suitable for vegetable plots.
Again, like Renee Seeds makes these cans of grandma's flowers or cutting flowers or pollinator. If you just have a small area, just a can of that's fine. You can go, I mean, there's tons of websites that sell wildflower mixes. I like Nature Seed a lot because in California, I used to get my seeds from the East Coast, and Nature Seed is in Utah, so just carbon footprint thing. And they have a low growing wildflower mix that I like to use around fruit trees because you don't want something 3 feet tall around your fruit trees. But yeah, I would look at how tall it's going to get and not put something super tall. But other than that, just put a nice mixture of wildflower seeds.
Okay. I guess Master Gardener warned somebody of buckwheat as being invasive, and they want to know your thoughts.
I've never found it to be invasive.
No, but it can self-sow, but I'm so happy when it does. I mean, it just saved me the work of sowing it. A lot of these, if you let them go to seed, are going to self-sow.
Yeah.
But I find that to be a benefit. If you don't want it, and this is maybe true of a legume, if you don't want it to self-sow, then go ahead and chop and drop before it has formed its seed. And of course, for weeds, like I always call February National Weeding Month. It's because before it's formed the little seed head. And so you want to go ahead and chop and drop your weeds in February.
Yeah.
I do like, personally, I like it when my buckwheat self-sows because it just makes my job easier.
Yeah, but if you don't want it to be invasive, cut it down before it forms seed heads. And
Right.
that's also very true of the grasses, like the rye and the oats and the wheat, barley, any of those. Before, you want it to start to form the seed head, but you don't want it to make seeds. You want to cut it down before that happens.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people say the same thing about a legume is once it starts putting energy into developing the seed, it's taking all that nitrogen it's stored in its roots and it's putting into seed development.
Yeah, they say with favas, when you're at 25% flowering, cut them down.
Yeah. So if you don't want your buckwheat to self-sow, just cut it before the seed head has formed.
Yeah.
So the next question is, do you have to be as careful with pest controls as you are for a garden you would be eating?
Pest controls.
I'm guessing pests on the cover crops.
Oh, I don't worry about pests on my cover crop because they bring in predators.
Yeah, I think some of the point of that one slide was you actually want the pests on your cover crops. So it brings in the good guys to eat the insects on your food crops.
Yeah, like my milkweed is covered in aphids, and I mean, who cares?
No. Yeah. No,
I don't.
Same with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you suggest some cover crops for somebody who has a lot of wildlife, including deer, in their yard?
You
Do
know,
they want to feed the deer?
I hate to keep plugging nature seeds, but they do have a deer resistant mix.
Oh,
I don't have deer issues, so I've never used it. I don't know how good it is. I know if deer are hungry enough, they eat even what they're not supposed to eat because they don't know they're not supposed to eat it. But that's something I would Google, but I can say Nature Seed has a mix, a wildflower mix that's deer resistant.
and if they're trying to feed the deer, then you do a different Google search.
Yeah. Well, if you're trying to feed the deer, then plant grasses.
Grasses, yeah.
I like it.
Okay, so are there any benefits to composting the cover crops versus using it as a mulch, or situations you would do one over the other?
Oh, I do both.
Do both.
Do both. I mean, well, I personally, I cover crop. What I do, cover crop, put a little bit of compost over that, and then put a little bit of mulch over that.
Yeah.
Kathleen, do you have?
I chopped down my old cover crop, and if you haven't cover crop before, just cover crop, and then I use a fine mulch, which Lyngso's, I think it's your soil amendment. Is that next to your distal?
Yeah, the amendment mix.
Yeah, the amendment mix. I actually use that as a mulch on top of seeds I've cover cropped, and it works perfect.
And so you can use that as a mulch, or do you need to protect the amendment mix?
No, I use it as a mulch.
Oh, okay.
It's just like G&B soil conditioner,
Oh, okay.
or very similar. And I don't put compost. I mean, you could, it wouldn't hurt, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, but if you have a cover crop with 15 different plants,
Mm-hmm.
you have the diversity. You don't need to add compost.
Yeah, it's kind of like that question earlier from Marty. I think that was the question. It's just adding. I mean, I think of compost as like a very slow release food for my soil food web.
Yeah, and you're adding more diversity.
Yeah, and organic matter. The main thing, if we could all increase our organic, ideally, I think you want 5% organic matter in your soil, which is kind of hard to do.
Gabe Brown has like 8%.
Wow. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
A lot of farms in this area, they're lucky to have 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
So he's been, that's another good, it's Gabe Brown's another good, he has a book out, and that's another good resource.
That's a great resource. Yeah.
For no-till. Yeah, for regenerative ag and no-till and cover cropping and diversity of crops.
Yeah.
Oh, are you?
No, I'm going to, there we go.
What you doing?
Can
Oh,
you
do you
see
have
that?
it in there?
Yeah, here.
Perfect. So while you're doing that,
There we go.
can you explain again how to harvest the root cover, just to cut it down and mulch over? So pretty much no tilling it in.
Exactly. Here,
Yeah.
I will, boom, boom, boom.
Now, there are some farmers who will work it into the first couple inches of their soil. So Kathleen, what did you cover with there? What is that?
That is soil amendment.
From Lyngso?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And
The
the
other thing,
amendment mix there has compost in it as well as the redwood sawdust. So I think that's a great option to cover it with.
Yeah. Yeah.
and Kathleen and I, in the past, we have used, is it G&B soil conditioner?
Yeah.
Which is kind of woody, so we do use it as a mulch. If you're just using compost, you don't want to use compost as a mulch because you want to protect it. Because the sun, well, the whole reason why you're doing cover crops is protection of the soil, because the sun and the rain really beat down on bare soil. So the main thing is you never want bare soil.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't worry about the little bit of, or the however much compost is in the soil amendment, because when I'm cover cropping, it's going to germinate so fast.
Yeah.
That
It'll be covered.
I don't worry about it. And plus this time I covered it because the darn birds.
Yeah. Okay.
Notice
So-
my espalier back there?
Oh yeah, it looks really pretty. What's that growing up on the big vine or something? back there?
Butternut squash.
Oh, butternut squash. Okay.
Can you tell?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, how do you harvest vegetables when they're mixed in with the cover crops?
Carefully.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, kind of broccoli's on the broccoli plant, but it's not on the veg plant.
Yeah. Well, if you see in this, I still in Santa Cruz, which is where I am, I have broccoli growing with my tomatoes.
Yeah.
Because UC Davis did some research, and if you plant broccoli right after your tomatoes or with your tomatoes, it will break the verticillium wilt that tomatoes get. So I always follow my tomato crops with broccoli. And I mean, I have them going at the same time. And that broccoli, I also threw broccoli seeds, which you can't really see in that picture because I didn't take a picture of that. But yeah, just, you know, like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So are there situations in which you would want to amend a yard, break up the soil, or rake in the seeds? This person's in a dry, hot climate, zone 8 in Arizona with compacted soil.
Yeah. In fact, my front yard, I took the lawn, I replaced my lawn, and I got a 24-inch broad fork. I don't know if you know what a broad fork is, but it has tines like 20, well, maybe it's not 24 inches. Anyway, it's like a giant, oh, I'm trying to think of the word. Spade? No, not spade. What's where it's tines that go? Anyway.
Yeah.
Google broad fork, and you'll probably want to
Pitchfork?
break up your soil with a broad fork first. And then I would cover crop with a lot of daikon radishes, as well as sunflowers. I would use really deep rooted plants. And I would cover crop with those and, you know, put mulch on top and cut that down, and then do whatever you want to do with that landscape.
Yeah. And if the soil is really compacted, and you could grow out a couple, you know, like when I say a season, let's call that 3 months, but you could do it 2 or 3 times and plant out 6 months from now.
Yeah, when I, in my vegetable bed, like this bed this is its second cover crop. I cover cropped it this summer with sunflowers and grasses and all kinds of stuff. So this is the second season of its cover crop. So next season, this February, I will plant this out.
Yeah, and that's how some people do it, is they always keep 1/3 of their beds in cover crop and 2/3 in production. And then some people intercrop. So you don't, just depends on how you want to do it. If you want to intercrop, then you can be growing food crops simultaneously with cover crops.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a couple different region-specific questions here. One in Zone 7B, New Jersey, and then the other one is in Canada, I believe, where they have short growing seasons. Any suggestions for them?
Well, I know Gabe Brown is in North Dakota and he cover crops successfully. I would actually Google Gabe Brown and see cover cropping works everywhere. But if you had a short season, I would probably do like buckwheats and I don't know if you want to do grasses, but there's wildflowers that grow everywhere. So I would maybe even contact your native plant society and see what your annual wildflowers are that are native to your area. And I would cover crop with those.
And maybe some lupin. There are a nitrogen fixer, but
Yeah.
But I think Gabe Brown would be a good resource. And Dr. Christine Nichols is another good, she works mostly in Dakota. She was born in Minnesota, but she consults in Canada and in Manitoba or something like that. In Canada, and they say, oh, we have such a short growing season. And she said, no, you don't. You've got 280-day growing season. But she goes, if there's sun out, if you have 280 days of sun, you can grow things. So obviously not if it's under snow, but anyway, she seems to be very optimistic about what cover crops you can grow in Canada.
Yeah.
So lots of questions.
That's cool.
Yeah, lots of questions about lots of questions about the chop and drop method. If you could just go over what tools you use for that and when exactly do you chop and drop, especially under fruit trees and with vegetables.
Kathleen, do you want to start and then I can say what I do?
Well, this was kind of a chop and drop right here I never cleared out what I cut down. I just covered it up.
Yeah.
And when I mowed it, I did it with my mulching mower. I didn't bag it and take it away. But like chop and drop with fruit trees, when I prune my fruit trees, the branches that I prune off, I just let them fall on the ground.
Yeah. And it depends, I think, a little bit on your aesthetic. So
Yes.
I did a summer prune on my fruit trees, but then I put them into a pile to compost. I chop them up into little pieces and put them in a pile to compost them. But I chopped and dropped my orchard cover crop, I'm going to say 4 weeks ago or so, maybe a little bit more. And all I do, it depends on how tall. I had a lot of sunflowers. So it depends on how tall things are. I just either use my hand pruners or you can use what are the garden shears that have big blades?
Shears.
Okay. Or garden shears, and you literally just chop, 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 like every kind of inch, every 2 inches, I just make a cut and chop it all down. Since I'm cover cropping right back into it, sometimes I'll cover crop ahead of time and put the seeds down and then do the chop and drop. So it just drops to the ground and covers up. You want a little bit of cover on your seed. You don't really have to work it into the soil, but you could either put, like we were talking about, you could put a little compost over it, or even just a little fine mulch over it, something to protect that seed a little bit. And I do that usually with my last cover crop. So I just chop it into little pieces, let it drop to the ground. I did put a little mulch on that after I did it. But my cover crop, yeah, it's already up. It already looks good. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. And then, so can you thin out cover crops like with radish? Do you need to thin them out?
No,
Just leave them as is. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and
I
just
would.
leave that big daikon radish, just leave that whole root in there and just take out the tops and
Well,
it'll
just chop off the
decompose.
top.
Pardon me?
Just chop off the top when it's time to terminate.
Yeah. And they die back, but again, like we were talking earlier, if you don't want, I think I saw clover in here somewhere as a question. If you don't want clover over your entire property, then chop and drop before it goes to seed.
Yeah, and same with the daikon radishes.
Yeah.
And I
Same
let
with
them go to
mustard.
seed because then I don't have to buy more seeds.
Yeah.
But yeah, just chop them off like an inch below where the root starts, the radish starts. So just a little bit below that, chop them and they won't grow back.
And is it a problem to chop and drop something like cowpeas where it can be susceptible to mosaic virus or potential for encouraging diseases to happen?
Don't know.
I don't know that either.
Okay.
I would contact your
Local master gardeners.
or your local USDA if you're in the States, your local ag expert, because I don't know.
Okay. And this is going back to the broccoli tomato
Cool.
co-planting that you were talking about, Kathleen. And since they're both heavy feeders, do you plant something else following broccoli and tomato?
Well, after I do tomato and then broccoli, then that bed becomes a cover crop for 2 seasons. So that's my rotation.
So just broccoli and tomato back to back, essentially?
Got broccoli, yeah, tomato and broccoli back to back. And then when I take the broccoli, when I harvest the broccoli and finally take it out, which I will just cut down, then I will cover crop that bed for, I'll do it this winter and then this spring. And then next summer, I will plant it out.
Yeah. And that's a good point. When we leave roots in the ground, we leave all roots in the ground. So we leave our tomato plant roots in the ground. We leave our broccoli plant roots in the ground. So we leave all roots in the ground because all that's doing is adding organic matter to the soil. Now, if it's diseased, and maybe that was the cowpea question,
Yeah.
you know, if you did get verticillium wilt in your tomato, then you might want to take those roots out. But other than that, I chop and drop with everything, not just cover crops, also with my food crops.
Yeah, I chop and drop everything.
Okay. So someone just recently purchased winter edible crop mix seeds from Peaceful Valley, which contains fava beans, snap peas, and yellow peas. And they were sort of surprised to hear the recommendations of just one legume. If you could comment to that.
Yeah. I mean, I would take that mix and I would add to it some wildflower seeds, because you're actually not going to get the benefits of a legume with that many legumes.
Yeah. Although, you know, there's another way to look at it. Kind of, so what? I mean, So you're growing like,
Yeah,
you're
you
just not,
still have roots in the ground. I mean, it's still better than not having a cover crop.
yeah,
But I would add to it because you want at least 8 plants, 8 different types of plants,
Yeah.
8 specific plants, I should say, in your cover crop cocktail.
yeah.
And it's not new research, but like that many legumes is kind of old thinking. Is that okay to say?
Yeah, I think that's fine to say. Well, and I think we learned this from a soil scientist. But you know, the other thing to look at it, if okay, so it's not fixing nitrogen, but you could let it go to seed, and you could let those seeds fall. What I do with my fava, so I'm not so concerned. I have plenty of nitrogen in my soil. Everything seems to be fine. I just let my fava go to seed, and then it does a new crop. And after something's gone to seed, it's not fixing nitrogen anyway. So
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so someone actually asked if you grow favas to harvest, does the soil still benefit?
Yes.
well, it still benefits because you've got roots in the ground. You're not, if you think you're getting a nitrogen boost, you're not. You're getting nitrogen neutral because it's now used those little nitrogen nodules to form the seed.
Yeah, but you probably don't need to be adding nitrogen anyway.
Yeah, so you're probably fine.
Yeah. Yeah, because a
And
lot of people like to eat fava beans.
Yeah, but just do understand, if you're eating the crop instead of the soil eating the crop, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're not cover cropping then. You're growing an edible crop, just like broccoli, tomato, a production crop. And that's fine, but that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh. So how long does it take for the roots to decompose if you're going to leave them in the soil?
3 weeks. I don't know.
I was like, wow, that's quite fast.
Kathleen, you're so funny. Well, I think the little tiny roots decompose pretty quickly, but I leave my broccoli roots in the ground, and then when I come back to plant in there, and I leave the stubs there too. Sometimes then I pull those stubs out and I just compost them, and what comes out is like a little claw-looking thing.
Yeah.
So all of those roots, and that might be 3 months later, all those roots have already decomposed, other than the really kind of woody part of the broccoli plant, which then I just put into my compost pile and compost it. The homemade compost is always the best. That's always your best compost, is homemade compost. But
Yeah.
second best is probably Lyngso's distilled structured compost.
So should folks get their soil tested for nitrogen before they plant legume cover crops?
Well, personally, I wouldn't bother, but Kathleen.
I've never tested my soil. I had a teacher at San Francisco City College that said how your plants look is your soil test. If your plants look good, then I wouldn't bother. But if you feel better having your soil tested, and if you're in a very urban environment, you might want to have your soil tested for heavy metals. But I honestly have never had my soil tested.
Yeah. And it might tell you, I don't know. I have had my soil tested in the past, and they always say the exact same thing, is add more organic matter, add more organic matter. So
Yeah.
I haven't had my soil tested probably in 8 or 9 years. And I just add more organic matter whenever I can. And that's what cover cropping is, adding compost, adding mulch, keeping your soil covered. That's what you're doing, is adding organic matter. So
Yeah, like this lemon tree, it might need a little nitrogen, but it's cool. And when the weather is cool, your citrus are going to be nitrogen deficient.
yeah, when it's colder out. Yeah.
So do you folks have cover crops recommendations that can be grown alongside with vegetables that can help avoid insects that might go after the vegetables? So I guess codependent pest management, cover cropping.
Yeah,
I
like the
guess.
companion planting.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, marigolds, and I don't know, are people still using marigolds, Kathleen, for
nematodes.
nematodes?
I actually think I'm trying to think where I saw it. There's a mustard that is supposed to be better for nematodes now than marigolds.
Oh, okay.
It's called, no, I don't remember. Anyway, no, like a plant that repels insects. I don't know of any plant that repels insects, except if your plants are healthy, insects shouldn't be a problem. They're only going to get insects when either they're dying because they're supposed to be dying, like at the end of their life cycle, or they're not healthy, and then they'll get attacked by insects. Unless,
Yeah.
of course, it's brassicas, which would be broccoli, cabbage, kale, all of those. They'll get cabbage moth, and they'll outgrow it if they're okay.
Yeah, but at the end of their life, they will get aphids. Aphids are going to move in. It's the end of their life. They're putting out a whole bunch of nitrogen, which is they're doing what they're supposed to do. It's telling the, hey, we're about to die. If you want some free buffet, come on over. And they feast on all those brassicas that are about to die anyway.
What's
And
a buffet?
what's a buffet? Oh, that's how my husband says it. I think it's actually buffet. I've
A
adopted
buffet?
that. It's a free buffet for all the insects. But that's what they're supposed to do. That's the life cycle. They're about to die. The insects come in, help kill it, and off you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is two different questions, but sort of related. So I'll ask it anyway. Do you mix your own cover crop cocktails to spread or cover crop seed cocktail with soil to spread it, or just scatter the seeds? And what tool would you use to seed a large area, or a seed spreader, essentially?
I would use my hands.
I
guess
just
Is that your hands, Kathleen?
I just, I throw seeds out. You could buy one of those, those things that you put seeds in and you crank.
Yeah. I just throw them out by hand also. I guess how large of an area? Are we talking 10 acres or are we talking?
Yeah, if you have 10 acres, then you're probably going to want a tractor with a drill that drops the seeds in the ground. But if
it's a 10,000 square foot lot, you can just distribute by hand.
Yeah, and
Like
then
1 to 2 acres.
2 acres.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty big.
That's like Kent's, huh?
That's like Kent's, but I think you could still do it by. It just depends.
Yeah, we did Kent's by hand.
Yeah, my brother has. I guess he has 5 acres altogether, and we just distribute by hand. But yeah, one of those little one of those little. I think it's made by Scott. Those little things that make seeds go all over.
Yeah. Yeah, but then you do need to cover the seeds lightly with something.
You need to rake them. Well, then you could just distribute. You could put a little bit of compost or a little bit of mulch on top.
Yeah. And for 2 acres, you might want to rent a little tractor for that. A little ditch witch.
Yeah.
So would you then recommend mixing the seeds with the compost while you're spreading it, or just spread the seeds as is?
I would spread the seeds as is and then cover them lightly.
That's what I do too.
Yeah. Whenever you're in doubt, think of how does nature work? So nature, the plant forms the seed, it forms a flower, which then becomes a seed, which then drops to the ground, and then the plant dies and covers the seed. So when in doubt, pretend you're a plant.
Yeah. So any cover crop recommendations for flea beetles or leaf miners? Or that's more like IPM.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I would rotate my crops. I mean, for leaf miners, instead of planting
Beets,
I
and
don't-
spinach, and whoops.
beets and spinach and amaranth and quinoa, instead of move that to a different bed and give that bed a couple seasons off of, I don't say Chinapoddaisy correctly, but give the amaranth family a little break. And that'll break the cycle of the leaf miner. Flea beetle, I always get on eggplant. I don't know why I always get a little bit of damage from flea beetle on eggplant, but it never
Never
amounts
kills your
to anything.
plant.
Pardon me?
It never kills your plant.
No, it doesn't cause any damage. It's still very productive. I don't do
And-
anything for insects.
Leaf miners are really kind of cool,
They are cool.
and it's not going to hurt you to eat them. But they've probably left the leaf by the time you harvest it.
Yeah, but they are cool
They
because
have protein.
So how bad is it to never give your planter beds a break from growing crops to harvest?
Oh, crops to harvest. How bad is it?
very, very bad.
So I guess I
No,
know sometimes folks really let their beds sit fallow over winter.
Oh,
and
never do that.
Yeah, no, you're better off planting to harvest than not planting anything.
Yeah. You never want bare soil. That's like number one enemy is bare soil.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like bare soil. It would be like if you don't feed your dogs all winter.
Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, you need to feed what's living in your soil, and they need roots. So you're better off growing a winter crop that you're going to harvest than not growing anything.
Yeah.
So
And-
you can, as long as you leave the roots in the ground, I mean, it's not preferable to never cover crop, but it's not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing in the world is when you drive through farmland and you see fallow soil.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing in the world.
So you always want to be growing something. If let's say you only have one bed and you don't want to give it up to cover cropping because that's the bed that you're going to be eating out of, then what I would do is still always leave those roots in the ground and still chop and drop the part of the plant that you're not eating. And you could add a little compost, you could add a little mulch. So you can add nutrition other ways if you're not going to cover crop. Or you could also intercrop a little bit. And if you're growing, right now you're growing all your brassicas and all your Chinapoddaisies, just go ahead and throw in maybe a little bit of a little buckwheat or a little something to feed the soil. But as long as your soil's covered, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, roots in the ground.
Roots in the ground.
And how many seasons do you recommend to plant cover crops before actually planting veggies in a raised bed?
Um,
For your soil.
if it's a new raised bed, I would plant veggies right away.
Depends where your soil, if you just use your soil from the ground to put into your raised bed, that's a little different equation than if you, let's say, got veggie blend from Lyngso's. If you're just using your native soil, you actually might want to cover crop first.
Yeah, depending on the quality of your native soil. So
Yeah,
that's hard. I mean, if you have good soil, go ahead and plant production. If your soil is not that good, I would cover crop for 2 seasons.
Okay, so if it's native soil, in this case, it is their native soil. So you'd recommend for 2 seasons of cover cropping before.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the quality of their native soil. Some people have great soil. But yeah, I mean, go smell your soil, see how it's doing. I would, like, if today, I would go and throw a bunch of radishes and some wildflower seeds out there and see what they do.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And with
Yeah.
any soil, so if they are using native soil, you don't need to so much worry about this, but if you are bringing in soil to put into your raised beds, make sure, and then this is not out of the scope of this class, but make sure you don't have, make sure you mix some of the new soil in with your native soil. So you don't have where the roots go and then they hit the native soil and they just stop and they're not going to go any further. What's that called, Kathleen? The striation in the soil.
I'm blanking. I'm sure Ken knows it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It just sort of hits that clay native hard
Yeah,
pan.
it's called
and
the
then
soil interface.
You want to make sure you mix that soil in with your native soil so you have a really good interface. Otherwise, you might as well just plant it in a pot.
Yeah.
So going back to the garden bed and planting, consistently, should you only do a cover crop and then give up crops to harvest periodically? Rather than, planting crops instead of cover crops. So I guess timing wise, would you rather cover crop or harvest or plant plants to harvest?
In that situation, I would probably intercrop because it sounds like they're limited on space. So I would plant both cover crop and production at the same time.
Okay.
What do you think, Lisa?
Yep.
Okay.
I was zoning out a little bit.
Don't fall asleep, Lisa.
I'm not gonna fall asleep, I'm just zoning.
Well, I think we covered all the questions for most of it.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Oh, it's Ellie. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope a good takeaway is just make sure you always have your soil covered. That's the most.
Yeah, and cover cropping can be beautiful.
Yeah,
it is beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. And if you haven't watched that movie, I know we've only mentioned it like 5 times so far. If you haven't watched that movie, go ahead and watch it on Kiss the
Ground. Then everything we said will make sense.
Yeah, and there's some good, if you look at the people who are talking in that movie, they've almost all of them have written books like The Soil Will Save Us. And there's just so much good information out there right now on cover cropping and no-till.
What's Gabe Brown's Dirt to Soil? Something like that.
Yeah, shoot, I have his book, but yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's such good resources now. I'm trying to find it. Oh, Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another good one.
It is.
All right.
All righty. Well, thank you, Lisa and Kathleen. Thank you so much for your class today. And it's really, really fun talk. And I'll send out the email to everyone.
Okay. Oh, that's a pretty cover crop right there.
Yeah.
All righty. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.